get an interview, which might be a challenge, maybe sometimes an entry-level role, and also less about which disappeared here, about people management roles, because I didn't have a people management role. And also, I was looking at many companies in parallel versus some folks might think there's this one big company I want to completely focus on that. I was not looking at this from that approach. The reason I'm thinking putting this up front is to like thinking the ideal customer profile versus the opposite, right? So that's what I'm doing here. And so I'm also not talking about the cold outreach playbook. Like what can you do to reach out to 100 people and then they give you like get you a referral or something. So that's less of a focus for me, but I'll touch on that. So I've broken it down into 10 lessons. First two lessons are overarching, and then the subsequent lessons touch on one part of like the overall job process. So my first lesson was to have one system that you're using for a job search. Now, for example, I used a AI job search as a coach for me throughout this, and I'll touch on that. Second was think of it as like a pipeline. How can you think of your interview process as a pipeline? And third is, again, think in a sales mindset. You can have notes about the companies you're talking to, about the people you're talking to. It should not remain in your mind. It should not remain on one piece of paper. It's something that you note down and that you can reuse and compound for you. And this is an example of the AI job search coach that I used. If you go to GitHub, Noah, like this person, so you'll be able to reuse this code skill. This is a skill, like you might have heard of skills and extra. So this is a skill which I found out from Lenny Raj's speech. I copied it over, tried to use it, and then it did a lot of things great. Some things it didn't do so well. But many times I faced a challenge which it didn't do how I want to approach job search. I could create folk that chat and tell it, this is how I want you to change your skill. So it's getting more and more customized for me. So that's how I use this, and I touch on how I'm using this in all the parts of the job search. I also used templates. So these were like a bunch of markdown files. So it's a company name. So one file for everything you know about the company, and here for all the job descriptions. So always replace job descriptions because they changed. Third, for the people you meet in the interviews, make a list of that. Fourth is one document per person you meet. And next is messages. So if you want to draft it, if you want somebody to refer you, you don't it shouldn't just be in your WhatsApp or in your LinkedIn messages. Also say that here, because the next time you want to draft it, now I can use that to draft your next message. Then take home assignments, write up of applications, like you might tell me about your greatest accomplishment, like those kind of questions, right? So how do you reuse that? So those are some kind of things. So I would have one folder of all of these templates, and I had one small script here. So anytime I interview with a new company, the script will just copy all of this over and rename the file. Simple stuff. And this is an example of the company research template, where it's the company name and I didn't realize the resolution would be really far from what I expected. So this is like an agent note. So I had some agent notes where the AI would read it and understand what needs to be filled in each section. So what are the details of the company? Who are the thinking in the company? Like for example, the CEO, CTO, or I can go to LinkedIn and look up who are the likely hiring managers, who are the potential colleagues around me, and I would write down like one liner about it. And these would be things that I could use in culture. So this culture news. So these would be things that I could directly bring up in interviews right from the recruiter call stages. So that's where this would all be helpful. And of course, I use AI to fill this in. There's like ChatGPT or Perplexity, research mode, or if you have Codex or Claude or anything, you tell them to do web search and fill this in. And then this was my template for a person. So each person I'm talking to, I would have one section for the timeless reads, timeless things about the person based on the LinkedIn profile. So just copy paste the LinkedIn profile into any of the AI tools to fill this out. What's the career chronology like? What's some top of mind things for them? And also see what's mutual between you and them. Maybe like I was a semiconductor engineer 10 years ago, and if they have been like any company or anything semiconductor related, I can bring that up. Or I noticed something they posted about their kids. I'm not going to say I saw you posted about your kids, but I'm going to myself naturally bring up, oh, my kid, I was doing this. And if I see even a smile from them, then I can poke, oh, do you also have kids? So it's different ways to build rapport at the start of conversations.
Can I ask questions now?
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you create LinkedIn profile, you get that person's profile URL directly, or there's some connection between your system to?
So I go to the LinkedIn profile. I just just copy all this. The reason for that is LinkedIn is amazing against bots.
They don't allow you to scrape it.
And also, some tools might be able to do it. Like, for example, Perplexity as a comment browser, AI browser, that does this job amazingly, but it burns through tokens a lot. So, I have to find this balance, like how much I'm willing to spend on this. So, when I had Perplexity subscription, I used to use it for this. I used to do like this is I had a big prompt I had generated over time, and I just give that prompt and it would give me all of it out. So, because what I need to do is I can just copy paste it actually. I need to go to the see more of education, see more of experience, the about section, expand. Okay, there is in posts. Maybe if you're just reposting, then I can go a little bit more to see what they do actually post about, what do they think about. So, those are the kind of things
I
I
have
do.
a question. Can you more elaborate on how to use this information to build a rapport? So every time I have seen this on LinkedIn as well, people say that go through the person's LinkedIn profile, but I'm not able to make my mental model how to bring this in the interview, like how to bring that anecdote from their profile in the interview.
Got you. Two ways, or maybe three ways. One is at the start of the interview, I always think what's one thing that I like about this person that I can start the conversation with. So immediately, the first thing I tell the person is, I love how you did this.
Okay.
I saw that. You have a smile from the interview, right? Yeah. Second is, during the interview, even though they might be asking me questions, and I answer that, and then I say, actually, I noticed you have done something similar in this company, in this role. How was your experience from it?
Okay.
I love that. And your word from an interview is also how do you change it from interview to an informational, where they want to share. Because you want to minimize the percentage time when you're answering questions and they are not. Because they're less likely to give it.
Yeah.
The third way I use it is I tailor questions at the end of the interview to ask them. So like I have some standard questions like in the template I have, oh, these are some good base questions. Then I have some questions for like recruiters always ask these 5-6 questions. Hiring manager asks these. And then I had one more section where I had an agent note said that based on this person's experience, think of some questions. I had one more section based on the previous interviews you had, what were the follow-up things you found out based on which you should ask this person a question. And so that's how the compounding comes up. Does that answer?
Thanks.
So then the lesson 2 is how you can think of your pipeline stages like sales. So you have a prospective company you're thinking about, you're applying to some companies, you might have recruiter calls, a lot of interviews, and so we'll double click on a bunch of these and then you will reach offer or act it. So this is an example of this was a job pipeline dashboard that I had. I concluded my interviews this week. So 5 offers, 2 interview notes, 1 hiring manager order. So basically, you have a way to visualize it. You have a way to, and then I have a way to show names, hide names. So for this conversation, hide names. When I'm sending it to friends and I'm like asking help for you, whatever, show names and send them the details because people are always willing to help. So this is an example, and another is this one where the reality is a lot of companies will reject you. But I prefer not to use the word rejection. You want to be positively motivated in this process. So I call it archive. Or you can call it closure. So I have this box, and that's always bigger than everything else. So by default, it's told like this is a self-built tool. So I told it by default when you load the page, this should be closed. Then the next part. So that was one part, which is like your pipeline. You're tracking your companies through it. The next part is prospect. So how do you prospect? How do you find the companies or roles that you're interested in? So there are 3 ways. We know job list. Everybody knows job lists, right? But there's also people list, company list. So what does this mean? Let's talk about company list. So this is an example from Sifted, from Wellfound, from some AI conference, from somewhere else. These were all different ways. I was targeting AI startups and scale-ups. So I wanted to find companies which are in Europe, which are doing the work I have, and then let's see if they have job openings or not. But company list is one way because today they may not have a job opening, but 1 month later or 1 week later they might have, and I need to be aware of them beforehand. And also a lot of these startups don't have the money or don't want to spend the money to also post a job on LinkedIn. It's really expensive to post on these platforms. So many of them have just their jobs on their own careers page. And that's the reason I want to find companies versus just let LinkedIn tell me. Also because we are in a very fragmented geography, right? Europe has so many countries. Somebody in Netherlands or Germany might be open to you working from here, but may not have posted for it to be a job in Dublin. And if it's something really relevant for you, then it makes sense for you to reach out to them.
So you're saying that basically you're using these sources to automatically trawl. You're feeding the AI with say LinkedIn or one of the sites you have there, and you're saying these are the kind of companies I'm interested in. Come back with a list of ones that are a good fit.
I know a lot of people, I've seen posts of people who do that and I've talked to people, but my approach was a bit manual. The reason for that was, and so there was a AI part, there's not any AI. The AI part was I've just copy paste this entire web page again, that copy paste string, paste it into ChatGPT where my tokens don't count and tell it convert it to a CSV. Then I'm going to go through these companies one by one. The reason again being that some of these are very good at blocking bots. So if they block the bots, I might get a false negative saying that, oh, this doesn't have a job offer, but actually the bot just couldn't reach it. So I did it manually.
But you're saying the source then is our job, our company lists
Yes.
some sort.
Yes. So like it could be, for example, 100 hottest startups in Europe, 100 fastest growing startups in Europe, or like 100 biggest companies, whatever. Like different ways, and there's a list for everything because lists are very SEO optimized. So many companies try to make lists, so it's self-equipped. The second part is job list sources. Even for job list sources, if you see here, I have filtered to remote jobs and UK. So apart from Ireland jobs, which like I'm continuing to work here, but you can also look for remote jobs in UK, Germany, Netherlands. That's my idea of country, but maybe there are more. The reason, for example, Spain and Portugal, for example, have lower salaries than what you get here. France, my guess is they might want folks, even Germany, France, I guess they might want folks who can speak French. So this is just, I've not done a lot of research, but this is just heuristically, I landed at that. And another advice which I would recommend is you apply if you have 50% fit to a role versus looking for 90% fit. That's something that research has shown time and again that, for example, women versus men, or like white people versus other minorities. People who are from the more affluent race, I don't know what's the right word, are more likely to apply even when they have a low fit. So then you actually get into the interview. So you also want to do that for yourself. And also, if you have questions, please speak up because we are small enough group, so we can make it a conversation. Then lesson 4 is on the. So we talked about prospects in the pipeline. The next part of the pipeline was applying. So now we are talking about applying. In applying, again, there are 3 ways of applying. There are applied, so you have applied to a job, basic, you got referred, again we know that, and inbound. So for me, actually, inbound was the strongest part that worked for me. This is like, these are my interviews and how they went through process. 15 companies reached out to me, out of which I got 5 offers. So 33%. Plus some of them actually, like one person reached out for Germany, one for Nordic somewhere. So if you exclude that, then the percentage is even higher. So you naturally want to get more of inbound. Right? These are recruiters or sources reaching to you on LinkedIn saying that, hey, we want to like, talk to you about an opportunity. All the interviews are still the same, but you have somebody batting for you right from the start from the recruiting team. And
how did they inbound? Was it because on LinkedIn you had open to offers or?
Yeah. So I made it open to work, but not in the way that you get the green logo. I did it so that only recruiters can see it. And there are still 3. So there are 3 modes. One is not open for work. Second is yes, passively looking. Third is yes, actively looking. So I first started with this passively looking, then I changed to yes, actively looking. And I hid it from like public. Just recruiters can see of other companies, not your own company.
And one more question. And optimizing the LinkedIn will increase the chances of getting inbounds.
Yes. So there are 3 things there. One is complete your profile on LinkedIn, so have sufficient details. The second is keep reconnecting with folks you know. So this is like, for example, I spoke to somebody 1 year ago, 2 years ago, whatever, and I'm reconnecting with them genuinely. Now, reconnection can sound like referral, but here what we are doing is we are talking to people we liked talking to, whom we think there might be something interesting to talk about, and we are having a conversation. Again, that doesn't lead to a job today. They might then, like for example, one of my close friends from Seattle, she was speaking to her former manager who moved to another company, and he was not hiring for an AI agents team in his company. And so like she's like, oh, if you're talking about AI agents, talk to Rachel. So that kind of connection is what you're trying to build. And now again, this is not going to be 90% of your time. You can't be doing 8 calls a day for this, right? This is
apologies for harsh.
product camp this today.
Yes.
I'm interested in like swapping notes on what's been going on as well. So reconnections. You want to be top of mind for people. There are 4 types of connections. There's one called dormant connection. This means people who had a strong feeling for you, but now it's weakened over the time. These people are known to be the most likely to connect you somewhere and get you jobs or opportunities because they will really think strongly of you, and they have drifted apart, which means they're in a different network as you instead of overlapping networks. So that's one benefit of reconnections. And the third is LinkedIn posts. So again, like not about like creating posts with AI and pasting, right? But like for example, I had already been writing on LinkedIn. I paused for a bit and then I resumed it. Now the value of LinkedIn posting is when I've used LinkedIn Sales Navigator. So my understanding is when you use that, you filter profiles, they are ranked. They have to be ranked in some way. So LinkedIn, one of the features it uses is how active is this person. So if you're posting every week, then you're higher on the rank relevance list of people who show up for a recruiter as they're searching for somebody.
And so when you say reconnections, you mean just reaching out to renew an existing acquaintance to
Yes.
Yep.
and remind them that you're on the market, basically.
I didn't even remind as much on the market, but
Yeah.
I suppose I should do it. I suppose maybe in the call people that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, but you're right. Like in some way you want to go in that direction.
Freshen the connection. Though,
Yes, yeah. I guess in LinkedIn post you don't want to talk about your available, but in reconnections you can.
Yeah.
The other thing about reconnections is earlier, like a few years ago when I was running consulting business, I was also doing the sales side of things. I found it very easy to go to my peers or juniors or relax to friendly folks and reconnect with them. But then I realized when I was trying to build a tracker like all of this, that actually whom I need to talk to are the decision makers, directors, vice presidents, C-level, and I'm hesitant to go to them. And so that's the skill that you need to do more of them, even as a product manager, right? You need to put yourself in front of senior stakeholders. Same thing, you need to figure out how to do more in the job search. So some directors, what can you do? What kind of message can you write so they'll get on a call with you? And then what interesting topics can you have in the call so that it's like they come out of the call thinking, oh, that was fun to talk to them.
And so you said that you did that. You choose that hidden option on LinkedIn, not the open to work.
Yeah.
Any else why?
No research, I was just hesitating to pull it out saying that it felt interesting too. So no research around it.
I have done some research on that. And idea is, like you said, too desperate. When you have that,
Yeah.
that's like flashing sign that you're out in the market. And you don't need to tell everybody you're available because nobody bothers.
Yes.
It's recruiter who care anyways if they
Yes.
want to reach out. And with this, there is a existing mechanism within LinkedIn.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you show up in
Yes.
the right place. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
So we talked about inbound and then sometimes referral. But referral unfortunately didn't work out that much for us, for me. So I had 6 effort companies, none of them landed an offer. Some of them were very general rejects, even from the referral stage, not even getting an interview. One a role fit, one that I didn't do well in the interview. So the referral is supposed to be really powerful, but a few other candidates that I spoke to, and my personal experience was that it's referral may get your resume reviewed, but it doesn't mean you get interviews or you get reached the final round, right? So it's still a tricky thing, and I'm sure there are better ways to do it. This is my take on it. So I didn't see any interview lift from referrals. In fact, even interviews I didn't get as many. Like the conversion wasn't as high as I expected. That my resume was strong, and there was some roles which was exactly the role that I was doing before, and still no interview. So I totally felt that I don't know what's happening.
Did you find any patterns like maybe bigger companies need referral or maybe startups and growth companies don't consider referral that much?
Usually, the smaller the company, the more powerful the referral.
Oh.
Yeah.
Like for example, if I were to apply to Nathan's company, I would definitely want to talk through somebody there. Not so. There's two sides. One is for a smaller company, the volume of applications is less, but there's a lot more for stake with each person joining.
Yeah.
So
I understood what you're trying.
And also, smaller companies, the process is not as rigorous, so they get biased a lot easily. So referral actually bias is
Oh,
that
okay.
way. For example, with some of the opportunities I've interviewed with, if not now in 1-2 years ago, like I got through a connection, like we had very positive, fuzzy, like warm feeling conversations, and I know that this is going to move ahead much likely than if we spoke just about the business part of it. But on the bigger companies, the challenge is there are way too many applications, so they realize, oh, our employees are our best recruiters, so we need to enable them to do reference. But then what happens? A lot of people reach out to employees to do reference, even if not. So a big company, the delta should technically be higher because they have a lot of volume, so it should technically help you stand out of the noise even more. So I'm not clear why it's not working the way I thought it would. There were some companies, like some big companies which were like very big companies and stuff, and I thought, okay, I can get a referral. I have this friend there. I don't know when they'll reply. Let me just apply. And by the time they reply, I got an interview call as well. So again, I'm lucky that some things in my resume stand out, but I also have the timing component where they need to reply fast enough.
Yeah.
And this is an example of the overview where you can see that I can track what are the different sources, like inbound, applied referral, which stages did they go through, and where did they go. For me, the earlier pipeline that I showed you was more useful. But then at some point, I reached a point where I wasn't sure what am I not doing. Sorry, I was talking to a coach, a real coach, not a real coach. And he was asking, so what do you think is making your interviews not? What's failing for you in the interviews? And I said, yeah, these are the 3 things I've noticed. But he said, no, actually, how many of your interviews work? And I said, I have no idea. So I said, okay, I have all the data somewhere. I have the interview notes and all of that. Maybe I can tag all of it, and then I got this out of that.
So you use Trello for your interview, like you recorded your own interviews.
So I use it, yeah. And again, now it's your whether you want to do it or not. For example, the interview code skill I talked to you about at the very start from Lenny. So in Lenny's blog post, that guest speaker talks about how, yeah, this is, I don't know if you want to do it. I don't know how okay are you with it. But every interviewer the employee is recording their calls, and you are using this to improve your interviewing skills. Now it depends upon you. If not, what you do is immediately after the interview, you write down what questions were you asked, what do you think you did well, what do you think you could have done better. It's always an option.
But you're actually recording interviews and transcribing them.
Transcribing interviews without it's not really a recording, it's just the transcription.
Sure.
It is transcribing, yes. And it's so tag every archive that you have with the reason. So this helps you figure out if there's a pattern. For an example of reasons would be role fit, interview signal, location, or general music. Those are the kind of things. Then lesson 5, and this touches on what we were just talking about, is managing your calendar. So one is have multiple processes in flight at any time, and because you don't want to. If you're talking to this one dream company, they give you the offer, but the offer is not what you want. Now it's really hard for you to negotiate. So make sure that you have multiple in pipeline at the same time, and make sure you have some prep and buffer time. So let's dive in a bit more. So again, with the same data I already had each company in my pipeline with the next date tag. So I could create a calendar view of it. You see that here, this date I have interviews, that date that interviews. So because I had multiple a day or many in a week. So then, and the color coded to which level it is, because then that meant if a recruiter screen, for example, I don't want to spend more than 1 hour preparing for a recruiter screen because AI has already filled in all the information for me, and I want to read that, absorb, and be ready for that call. But I don't want to spend hours because sometimes you talk to the recruiter, the call goes amazing, and they say actually we filled it, or actually you're amazing, but you're not good for this role, for this other role, which we realized after the call, or they explained the role to you, there's no way out to do this role. So that's the reason you want to minimize time before recruiter prep. So this color coding helped me figure out like where do I want to spend time. And another example is of prep or buffer event. So before or after every interview or any call, I would just keep a small prep and buffer window. And at start I was doing it manually, and then I created an automation which did it for me. So this automation got used to check every few hours what all meetings do I have coming up. If there are any interviews or calls, then just create prep or buffer time around it. Because I want to be really intentional of what I do in the prep and buffer time, which is that in the prep time, I divide my screen into 3 parts. Middle part is the Google Meets or Zoom. Right part is granular, where I'm taking notes, any question they ask, any insights that they share with me. Left side is my why do I like this company? My introduce yourself tailored to this company and role. So I'm keeping those handy. Because those 2 things are things which will change so much company to company. And when you're in a high volume, you want to quickly be able to look at those bullets. The rest of the things are there in your mind. So that's how I would do it. And make sure you close all your coding agents that used to make me find laptops slow otherwise. Lesson 6 about interviewing, story bank part. So have a story bank. So you have your stories, have them essay or bullets, and then bullets instead of paragraphs. So some of these might be like basic stuff. So then you can think of different UIs that you want, which will help you prep better. For example, for me it was a flashcard UI kind of thing. And also see if you can practice with peers or experts. For example, Stellar Peers is a website which connects you to other people who are also looking for product management jobs. And you pair with each other to practice over a 1 hour session or 1.5 hour session. You interview them, they interview you, you share.
Nice. What website is it?
Stellar Peers.
Stellar Peers.
Peers.
And is that skill-based sort of peer looking, or are you able to search based on what skill set?
Yeah, you can, because everybody creates the way it works is everybody creates calendar invites on this shared calendar for their availability. For example, I can go and create a calendar invite. Today 4 to 5:30 p.m. I can do a call. Harshal plus blank. And Harshal, this is his experience, 3 bullet points. And I can say, oh, this is what I'm looking for. These are the kind of interviews I want to do, something like that. And so people will try to match. So it's peer-to-peer. Then also experts if required. For example, for me, after a while, I realized I'd been practicing with the AI coach a lot, but it kept giving me the same feedback, and I was not so aligned with it. It kept telling me I'm very verbose. I knew I was verbose. There's something else, I think, I felt like there's something else which needs to be fixed first. And I had set its directness to really high, so it used to keep giving me verbose. And I was like, oh man, I needed a different perspective because it could give me the feedback, but it couldn't help me frame a story. And maybe it's just I could have created a new skill, maybe, but I needed some expert opinion. Or maybe, so that's why I looked for an expert. I found somebody on through a friend who had recruited before. He connected me to somebody who was on top mate or service. So that's peers and expert.
And was it paid?
It was paid, yeah. Expert was paid.
Can you just flesh out what you mean by story? Like you walking into the interview with sort of 3 stories you're hoping to tell at some point during the interview. Is that what you mean by that?
No, story bank is like you try to think through the questions you're likely to get across your interviews. And then for those questions, you want to think of what's the most important experience you want to bring up. For example, you need to have 3 really meaty experiences, which if they dive into for 10 hours, you can keep enough 10 hours. Like half an hour, you can keep talking about it. So 3 such experiences, think of it as what are your 3 biggest accomplishments if somebody were to ask you. You have good enough depth to go into them. But now you might be asked story in a different angle. You might be asked, tell me a failure. Tell me a time you learned something. Tell me a time you had to manage stakeholders. So you can always reuse these stories for all of those things. Your accomplishment can become your failure story. But it's my story bank was, so this was my story bank example. So like S0, the AI is doing its own naming. Like question, tell me about the time you improved a key product metric. And so essay, the situation was this, action was this, the result was this. So something like that. So I wanted to, so I would speak out my answers and tell AI to store it in the story bank. And then it created like a lot more bullet points, and then I like iterated on this is the format I want it to have because I want to be able to read it later instead of just AI being able to read it. So most of these were generic across all companies versus just for the next one. But in my templates file that I mentioned, there was one file called preps, which was per company. For example, like workday_preps.mp. So this file is just the questions I expect to be specifically asked for this role at Workday. For example, there's one company where I was interviewed for pricing role. I never been a pricing product manager before. But the company was really cool. I loved the company. I've used the company. So like this, I wouldn't hire me, but I want to put my best foot forward. Like so I thought of those small examples I had of pricing work. Let's make sure I can have a good story around it and explain that in depth, how much I know. And then I use the AI to figure out, hey, this is what I did, but there's so much more there. How honest should I be? What should I be? Like, have that story in mind.
Just a slight twist on that is a tip I have. If you're going into an interview, just have 3 stories that you want to tell. So regardless that like will convey your relevance for this role, just have them in your head, and whatever question you get asked, you try to
Oh, that's
because this is
twist it.
yeah.
And for me, I think it was the same 3 stories that I think across all interviews. So that's why I thought of this.
I think another probably helpful tip if somebody else is searching that has worked in my favor is while you're also talking about experience, if you can talk about certain project examples in your CV, it's almost as if the person who's interviewing you, and I haven't looked for a job for the last couple of years now, but what would happen is the I would go on to those project examples and they'd be like, what's this about? And so you're indirectly forcing them to ask you about the meaty project that you want to talk about. That's worked really well.
Oh, there's a light check.
So sorry, since you mentioned about the point about being verbose, right? One of the things when I was typing out my story bank, by the time I was halfway through my first story, I got tired of typing. Because there's just too much content. You are compressing hours of work into a small answer. So what helped me was I used Whisper. So I just spoke to it for half an hour, 45 minutes. And then I said, this is my breakdown. Change it into a star format into 100 lines. I think that worked brilliantly for me.
I did the same. I used Whisperflow and used it for. So first, I would go into a practice mode or something where it would ask me one by one questions. I would answer all of them in detail. Then on one hand, it would give me the feedback. So I would just clone the chat and say, hey, save this story. And in the other, I would get the feedback and iterate over it. So yeah, completely agree. There's also services like mockif.com or something where you can do mock interviews with AI. This was also good. But after I finished the free credits, now I have to make a decision. I have a platform which is really good, but I have to pay. Or I can build my own and it'll have all my context. So you can guess where I went. So then I built something very simple, which was my goal was that I had that chat experience where the AI types a question to me and I can type back the answer which I was speaking to, like very whisper flow. But it was not helping me as much, or I was not having that motivation to do it. I would always find other things to do in the day. So I tried to see if there are different formats I can use. So this was one. My AI coach also, like job search coach, recommended against this because I had already taught it. Like anytime I get bored, I go and build stuff. So recommend me against it. I was pushing me against it, but I still tried it out. And so this was one another way for you to think of. Basically, you need motivation to keep practicing behavioral questions. But motivation is not something you need to be dependent on. Right? You should not be dependent on willpower to execute. So you need to build systems around it. So this is an example. And I used AI for hundreds of things, but always outside of interviews. I'm not using the interviews AI for you. I don't know if you've heard, but there are folks who are using AI to listen to the question the interviewer asks, create an answer, and the candidate is reading out that answer to the folks. This has been happening nowadays. And there are products which are gaining a lot of users and revenue also who are selling the service. So I didn't use that. I wouldn't recommend that. So I use AI for the applications, when you're writing applications, when you're editing your product memos or take-home assignments, when you're creating mock-ups or whatever, or for practicing interview and then debriefing after the interview. Use it for all of those. And then as mentioned, granular or memory. Happy to go with the memory route if you feel comfortable with that. And then this was an example of my, this OS that we're talking about. So this was my cursor window, where I have the documents and agents on different sides where I can just keep going through multiple things. Again, the resolution is quite something here. But basically, you want a home for all your work. And that home cannot be ChatGPT because that's not organizing all your information in the same way. It also can't be Google Docs. Few years ago, I tried to do all of this in Google Docs and then copy paste and stuff. But now it's a different experience. Maybe one more thing on interview is the pacing loops that we were talking about, having multiple things at the same time. So you can reach the offer stage with a company and it can still stall. Just have, for example, one company said to you, I completed maybe some 8 or 10 steps in the interview process, and then said, we have an important update on your application. I got in a call. So because this role was open for 6 months, the CEO said, maybe you don't even meet that person. I'm going to close this up. All of those things can happen. Another company, they gave me an offer, and then I wanted to ask them follow-up questions on the offer, but I had so many interviews the next week, and I thought, okay, I'll ask them the next Friday. But then they were like, I don't think you're serious enough. So all of those things can happen. So which means and also your interest can also flip. There were so many companies where I was doing the take-home assignment, I was like, oh my God, this is so interesting. But after subsequent interviews, this is really interesting. Oh, they are onto something. So interest can flip. What does this mean? Yes, so you want to make sure that they can reach the offer stage for any companies in your interview versus questioning yourself. I used to do this a lot. Like I have so many interviews on my pipeline, I can't prepare for all equally, which is still true. But so you want to be proportional in your weight to them, but you don't want to do zero preps or step out of interviews as much as possible. Because one is, every person whom you can persuade to move you to the next round is now a champion for you, if not in this company, in some other company, even if you don't want that role or get that role. And second is that your perspective can change or something else can drop off. So you want to pace. If you have just one process, make it really slow. One of my interviews, it went on for 4 months. So I used to celebrate like monthly anniversary. Some other interviews happened in 10 days. So, but the goal was how can the end for all of them coincide? And sometimes there was one company, this 4-month company, some other company, which was going very slowly. I was not that keen on the role. So that was another reason I wanted to slow it down, and I kept applying to a lot more places which can be more interesting.
And do you keep following up on mailing the HR or something to get to know the result of your past interview?
In one company I had to do, their HR was very slow and stuff. They gave me an offer, and still in between I had to keep following up so many times. So they were lazy or something.
Not just for the offer. Like suppose if you have 4 rounds, you are given one first round, and then they take 1 month to reply. What was the result of it? So
when you talk to the recruiter, you want to portray that you are in demand. So for that, what you do, they might ask you that, are you in pipeline at other places? Your answer should always be yes. Because you can interpret the pipeline however you want. You apply to a place, I am in the pipeline. You have 4 offers, I am in the pipeline. So either way, so that is one thing. Second is then also what's your timeline like? You can say, you can put that question back to them. What does your timeline look like? They will say next 2 weeks. We can wrap it up in 2 weeks. We're so fast. Yeah, that works for me.
Okay.
And sometimes they'll say, we can wrap it in 2 months. We're so fast. And still that's okay. And the other thing is, after an interview, I would connect with the person who interviewed me on LinkedIn or email. So, two, three things with this. One is that now I have one more channel to talk to them. Second is, sometimes it's a barometer. If they accept you on LinkedIn and they reply to you warmly,
Yeah.
most likely positive. and you have to move
Positive.
forward. But sometimes it also happens that they're still on the edge, positive, negative, or like very positive versus positive. But now they see your interest, and that also increases their interest. So this is all different ways for you to bias the process in your favor. And the other thing is, yeah, so sometimes I do follow up with recruiters, but generally my goal is, yeah, I think so. If you're in the interview process, then follow up. If you've just applied, then forget about it. Every job you apply to, you get an email that, yes, thank you for your received application, just archive it and forget about it. But once you're in an interview, you can follow up. Then the other part of interviews nowadays, so like this is something that I've seen change now, is there are a lot more product memos and some even do paid trials. So paid trials are things where they pay you for 1 day to 1 week to be part of their team and work there. And take home assignments we all know, but like this, they have just become a lot more prevalent now. Luckily, I felt like with AI and with all the structure, I was much faster to do it. Still, there was one assignment where I had so much context, so I just told it, write the assignment for me, and then I can edit it. It did such a bad job that I had to keep and because it already wrote it, I was anchored to what it wrote.
Yeah.
So I was going and editing something which was so far from what I wanted, trying to bring it here. Instead, like subsequent assignments, I started, wrote a bunch of stuff, and then told it to edit it, and that was a much better job. Or like brainstorm, ask questions, those things worked much better. The other thing I would always recommend to you is, again, if you're trying to put your best foot forward, they didn't ask you for a take-home assignment, or it's just the hiring manager call. Write your own product memo. Imagine what is your understanding of who are the customers of this company, what are their needs, who are the competitors, what are the gaps in this product. Based on that, what would you recommend? What would you recommend the CEO or this team do over the next few months? And then in a lot of cases, this has helped me significantly move forward. Like one CEO, for example, of a startup told me, I have done thousands of interviews, and this is the one where you have come across the most well prepared. So those kind of things really put you forward when you may not have. If you are the perfect candidate for the job, that's fine, but you're most likely not that for every single job, right? So how do you put yourself front in a better way? This really helps.
Sorry, how do you insert that take-home assignment in your conversations? Because I've done that before. In one of the calls, they're like, okay, you have done your part, and they had their own agenda for 30 minutes. So
Yeah.
me introducing it was deviating them away from their agenda.
That's true. And 30 minutes is pretty short time. That's also true. There are two ways. One is they may ask you something, and you can say, you can give a one-line answer first, and say, actually, I have something I have written about it. I would love to show you and get your thoughts on it, if you're okay with it. So you want to be okay with it, and if so, then second, which is like back here covered here, is you want to frame it as, this is my thinking, and I want your feedback so I can correct my thinking. Versus I want to show. Right? So that helps get their buy-in. They want to help you. They know everything, and they know you don't know anything. So it's a great way for them to feel it. This is an example structure that I use for memos. Clarify the situation, identify users, user needs, identify gaps, feature improvements, execution plan, GTM, metrics, evaluate, yes, trade-offs. So this is a standard structure I've used across case interviews, which happen live in interviews, but also in take-home like assignments or product memos. So that's really helpful.
Have you ever received any sort of critical feedback where they're like, all of these things that you spoke about, besides when you talk to the person knows a lot more than you do? Probably in a bigger company, it's going to be hard to make sure that your manager or your interviewer knows all these things. Like they might be working in a very siloed and a sort of a team, isn't it? And so, but where I'm coming from is probably if you're applying for startups and mid-sized companies where people are like aware of what the GTM model is and what's really happening from the sales angle and so on. Does your research actually has your research ever come across as you know that there is AI, you're able to use these things, but this just looks too weak. Like, why are you trying to show me something? I appreciate the effort, but doesn't it come off like a bit too, I don't know, you're trying to push something that you know very little about?
Yeah, you're right. So two criticism examples I can give you. Third, you're talking about the third one. So if I'm talking to a bigger company, I only want to talk about their product, and I only want to talk about what I know. In most cases, I know very little about an execution plan.
Yeah.
In most cases, I know very little. Go to market, I can think like a very few bullets. most cases, these are the parts where I would spend most time on. Because I can do discovery. Based on the discovery, I can do some recommendations and directions to go in. And I want to make sure that they're concrete enough and not what you're already doing. Or I can say, this seems natural, but I can see you're already doing it. So I'm doing that research, looking at their YouTube videos, looking at their competitors' YouTube videos, customer case studies, looking at those things for bigger companies. And whereas these are very far out, like they are confounded effect of hundreds of things, right? So I don't try to get to them. Metrics again, like I read 3 bullet points, 5 bullet points, or I'll make a metric tree. Nothing more than that. Two other criticism I've faced. One is somebody either mentioned directly or indirectly that this is too frameworkish, like you're applying a framework. So I realized that, and after that, I modified the headings in the document so they don't look as frameworkish. And earlier I used to put this at the top of the document saying, here's the structure I'm using, because people like to know where they're going. It's kind of a table of contents. Then I remove it so it feels more organic. So those were some tweaks on the feedback I got about this looks too like frameworky. Second feedback I got was I spoke with the CTO of a really small startup, seed stage like this one. He gave me a direction of where the product is going. So based on that, I thought, I researched, I wrote down. Then I went to talk to the engineering architect, and he said that's completely nonsense. And I realized in 1 week the direction had changed. So he had changed the direction. So yeah, that happened to me. So I was like, but this is what he told me, and it's technical. But then imagine if the direction had remained same, then it would have been fixed. So there's some things in my control which I didn't try. Now this is an example of how now I use AI for the memos. So left-hand side is everything in markdown plus movement diagrams. Right-hand side is, you'll see it gets clearly formatted as headings, as diagrams. So that's one benefit. And then tables, which on right-hand side is very barely legible. So when you use markdown, when you use movement diagrams, it really accelerates. Because your goal is you're building this one big system which knows all your accomplishments, which knows how you think, which knows how you prioritize, or which knows your conversations with other people in this company. How do you use it in your writing, or how do you just ask it to edit and fix typos? Right, so this is one way that you can just go from a markdown this way to this. Or for example, this deck I built, I deployed it to Railway, and my goal was how can I use AI for this deck to minimize my time. Which means I don't want to go to Google Slides, I don't want to go to Microsoft PowerPoint. I want to go to something which is already in my repository, where my agent, my job search AI already knows all my learnings from the job search. How can I leverage that? So I came across Reveal.js. And I also use this for my other take-home assignments. So Reveal.js was something which converts Markdown to presentation. This is a presentation with all its features. Now the offer part is one is that even when you reach finals, you can keep inbounds coming. Like when I had my first offer, I had only one offer at that time. But as I got like second, third, fourth offer, I wanted to make sure that I'm continuing to talk to like companies and continue to move things forward in case something drops and stuff. And because when you have overlapping offers, that's when you have real background. But basically negotiated connected. And at this point, you might also have a challenge either at this point or earlier when you need to figure out what really matters for you in a job. So at some point, you want to think through what's your rubric, what criteria for if you have multiple offers, or even if one you don't want to take. If you have only one job, but that completely is not what you want, still want to be aware of it. So what are the things that you are looking for in a job? And be aware of it. So I had, for example, 3-4 like top criteria, total 10 criteria, and then 3-4 things which I explicitly said I don't care about these things. So that's an example. Like scope of the work, compensation, pace of work, and you could have a bunch of other things. Peer groups and communities. So search is very one-sided. Right? You have your resume PDF and yourself to hold yourself accountable. Whereas the company has this entire system, not only ATs but employees. There is talking to you is one part of the day, but talking to this one company is a big thing for your entire week and month. You want to make sure that you are not emotionally drained from these things. And Slack communities are there, like Irish tech communities, one Slack community, you could be part of that, or there's Rand's leadership group, there's Lenny community, or also there's one thing that the product camp founder had mentioned, which is the Never Search Alone. So Never Search Alone is another community that you can join. So these are all different ways where they go. So for example, on the Rand's leadership Slack, there's a channel called Job Search Journal. And on the Job Search Journal, people just post random. You have experienced this thing. In your company, you might have a hash random kind of channel, right? So it's equivalent, but for job search. So people just sharing their experiences. You can go and share, oh, I had this interview, it went really bad. People will give you some ideas. Actually, what you're thinking was not the bad part. So it's really helpful in that way to maintain your morale. The 10th lesson is, is that you want to keep building on the side. For example, the reason for this is you want to energize yourself. You might want to level up your PM or AI skills, and you could also solve your own pain points in the job search process. So you could build using AI, you could build AI agents, and I found this to be a great way for me to stay motivated, for me to talk about things that I'm working on. An example is I built an opportunity solution tree thing. In a lot of interviews, you'll be using something like this, or even in a job where you say, these are the different opportunities your business has, these are the different solutions and metrics around it. So I built a tool around that. Or for me targeting AI jobs, it's one of the top questions I've been getting is how do you keep track of AI news? Because it changes so
Yeah.
much and you need to use that in your decisions. So I said, okay, so I built a workflow, an agentic workflow, which has a few inputs from any newsletters I already follow or some RSS feeds of OpenAI Anthropic and a few other places, and then removes all the advertisements, removes headers, footers, it converts it to text to speech and creates a private podcast feed for them. So there's different ways for you to keep building and solving things you have, which again keep building your AI product since that you can also show in the.
How did you create podcast?
So there's an XML file that you need to create, in which before that you need to create audio files, location, reference that location in an XML file, and this XML file then you load it into your podcast file. So the way I did it was OpenAI, I would use an AI agent to do the text changes, then I would use Google text to speech to convert it to audio and store it in Google Cloud. And then the XML file also in Google Cloud, which is just a list of pointers. And then that Excel renders as a podcast feed for me.
Interesting.
So that's everything. And here's a QR code, and he's yeah, it's pretty much. Oh, this is the URL. So this URL gets you back where we are here. So we give you this slide deck itself. And I'm also trying to convert this into a blog post with all the URLs because I mentioned a bunch of citations. So I'll try to upload it to the same URL so I can share it. More questions?
Oh, this is cool. So we can get this material access easily. Thank you.
What's the suggestion on coming from zero system to the first interview? Originally, you don't have the system, so applying to interview, you will be unprepared. But if you spend months to prepare, then you just defer your job search. What's the balance here?
I mean, for me, everything was in parallel. But the first thing you could start with is write down introduce yourself for why this job before an interview. Keep that handy next to you. Another thing you could do is immediately after the interview, write down the questions they asked you. If somebody asks you some questions, most likely somebody else will also ask you the same questions. So those could be like very starting points. This is